Hello friends, this is Dr. R.Sunderaraj, Assistant Professor of Commerce working in Nadar Janaki Ammal College, Sivakasi. So, welcome back to the session on interpretation and report writing. Before we get into the session, let me thank our management, Principal Dr. C. Ashok sir, HOD of PG Commerce, Dr. M. Salvakumar sir, and HOD of UG Commerce, Dr. S. Murugan sir, for giving me this opportunity and making me a part of this wonderful ICSSR and management sponsored research methodology course on social sciences. So let us get into the session. Now the topic that is given to me is interpretation and report writing. Now we know very well we often talk about interpretation and what is exactly interpretation and how to interpret the data and how to draft a report. This is what we are going to talk on this entire session. Now let me tell you friends, the most important part that a researcher has to do is interpretation. That is why I am telling you this is because, see, collecting a data is technical, and whatever the data you have collected is in a format which is not understood by everyone. And now this is the prime duty of the researcher to give some meaning to the data and present it to the people, to the society, to the to an ordinary, even to an ordinary man, where he can understand the purpose of the research, the objectives, and the way the researcher has collected the data and what he has found out. That is the summing up of findings and conclusion, right? And that is only possible when the proper interpretation is done. Now this is what we are going to discuss in this entire session. Now let me tell you, or let us discuss what is interpretation. Now before getting into this session, let me give you one small example, a very funny example. Often we might have come across a scientist who was doing some research on some frog, right? You know, frog. So what he did is he wanted to see whether the frog can jump. So yes, this is quite normal that a frog usually moves by jumping. So he was doing a research on that, and what he did is he brought a frog and he just clapped his hands and said jump. So immediately the frog jumped for 5 feet or 6 feet. Then what he did is he just chopped off one of its leg and again he said jump. Now it was having only 3 legs and the frog was able to jump only for 4 feet. Now again the scientist, what he did is again he chopped one of the legs and said jump. Now again the frog was able to manage to jump for 2 or 3 feet. Now again this scientist chopped one more leg. Now the frog is having only one leg and again he said jump. Now the frog was able to, very hardly it was able to move some inches, right, with that one leg of its. And again finally the scientist again wanted to test, and he chopped that 4th leg also, and after chopping that 4th leg, now the scientist said jump. Now the frog was not able to move at all because all the 4 legs were lost. Now the interpretation given by the scientist is, when you chop 4 legs of a frog, the frog becomes deaf. Now this was the interpretation given by the scientist. Now let us make this funny example a meaningful one, because interpretation is giving some kind of meaning to the data what you have collected. This is what we want to say. It is not like how you interpret something into something, right? Because the way the people look into the data may understand or may give some different kind of meanings, right? So now let me explain why this interpretation is essential, why we consider this interpretation to be the most essential or the most important part of the research. Because see, when the researcher interprets or when the researcher derives some meaning out of the data, that means he is progressing, and that progress is leading to the next level of his research work. Now until and unless he is able to do that, he is not able to establish some kind of relationship between the variables. He is not able to understand between the variables and other factors, right? So it becomes very essential for the researcher to establish some kind of relationship between the factors and the variables that is surrounding or is associated with his research. Now in simple terms, we can say that interpretation is the process of assigning some meaning to collected information. That is what I have given in the definition, and determining conclusions, significance and implications of the findings, right? So it's very simple. It's very simple. It said interpretation is the process of assigning some meaning to the collected information. Some meaning to the collected information. So what is that information? How you have collected? You have collected some kind of data. It may be a primary data, secondary data. Primary data is in first-hand information that you have collected. So already you have gone through the session of data collection. So you understand very well how this data are collected. Now this data gives you some numbers, right? Now what does this number speak? The number will not speak by itself. This is what you have to understand. Now the researcher, the purpose, the objective, what he had in his mind, the purpose of collecting such a kind of data will give some kind of meaning to that researcher, and that meaning is depicted in the interpretation by the researcher. This is what interpretation means. Now again you can say it's always done after data analysis. Data analysis aims to bring order and structure to the data by manipulating, summarizing and reducing. See, when you collect data, it's a huge, right? It's something more in numbers. Now what you have to do is you have to edit that data. That means you have to tabularize it, you have to consolidate it, you have to bring some proper, give some proper structure to that data, and only after doing that you are able to derive some meanings from it, right? Until and unless you do such systematic work on that data analysis, meaning cannot be derived out of it. So this is a very important task that we have to understand. So data analysis is very important before we go into the interpretation. So already we have done the data interpretation. You use some kind of statistical tools, you use some kind of tabulations for consolidating the data. You bring all the similar data together and you try to build some relationship between data, one variable with the another variables, and this all helps you in drawing some kind of conclusions, and these conclusions that you find out from a raw data, from numbers, that means when you convert that numbers into some meaningful words is what we call as interpretation. This is what you can simply say. So data interpretation is required because numbers cannot speak of themselves. It requires some human interventions. Human interventions means the intervention of a researcher, the psychology of the researcher, the purpose why he has collected this kind of data and what he has found of it, right? We dig out or we extract some kind of meaning, some kind of meaningful information, those information which can lead us to, or which can make us progress to the next level, and through which we can attain our objectives of the research, that is finding the solution to the problem. Now we started with a problem, we find some data, we try to extract some meaning so that we can give a solution. This is what we want to say. So just by mere numbers nothing is going to happen. Now the actual part of the research is happening when a proper interpretation is given. Now what kind of interpretation it can be? So generally what I believe is there can be two kinds of interpretations: qualitative and quantitative interpretation, I can say. Now what is qualitative interpretation? Qualitative and interpretation is simply where there is no numbers, which is purely descriptive, right? You need to describe the context, you need to describe the situation. Now this is a qualitative interpretation, because here I believe when there are no numbers, more interference or more analysis or more understanding of the researcher is involved, because he is going to narrate whatever he has observed throughout his research. Now this becomes very important because his observations from the study is going to be the future, is going to be the solution in the future. Now here when a researcher is intended to give some kind of qualitative interpretation, here we should believe that there are no numbers, there is nothing structural, only the words are going to work out here, and these words should depict the exact meaning what an researcher has to wanted to explain to the people. Now this is qualitative interpretation, and next one comes is quantitative interpretation. And quantitative interpretation is simple, where you have a lot of numbers which you have consolidated, presented it in a table, and you try to interpret by the consolidation of the numbers in the table, and which can be summed up, right, which can be summed up in some sentences, which or you simply you can say this quantitative interpretation is converting the numbers into words, right. That means what numbers are going to speak, you are telling in words. So this is what we call as quantitative analysis, right. So this is what we have said here. Quantitative analysis referred to a set of processes by which numerical data is analyzed. So this is quantitative interpretation. Now next comes as the main part, that is our research report. Now the most important aspect of a researcher lies in presenting his research report. Now the researcher should present his research report in a well drafted manner, or well crafted manner, you can say, rather you can say like that, because whatever the findings, whatever the study, the observations that he has made throughout his research in so many number of days, he is going to concise, precise and present it in a small report. Now this report has to be black and white. What? No, I mean not black and white of this video, black and white of the report. So make this video color. Yeah. Okay. So now we are back. Now what do you mean by saying black and white? Means what is correct and what is wrong has to be clearly stated, right? There is no confusing words. There is no misleading sentences or frames or phrases which can give some kind of confusions to the reader. So everything is very concrete, everything is very clear. Whatever is right, whatever is wrong is clearly stated in the report. Now before stepping into this report, we have to understand that the writing of report is a very systematic process, and you have to be very careful regarding the sections of your research report, regarding the language of your research report, regarding the systematic presentation of your research report, because you are going to use some kind of words, you are going to use some kind of tables to present data, you are going to use some kind of pictures, graphs to give some more meaning to the data that you have collected. Now when you say research report, it is an important document that serves as the first hand information for an ordinary person, because this is the research that you are doing is purely yours, and whatever data that you have collected, you have analyzed and that you have interpreted is going to be presented in this research report. Now see the importance of research report. I can tell you very simply. You can speak to people, only a few people orally, and you can explain them. Right now you can explain them and convince them, or you can make them understand what exactly you have found in your research, and you can sum up the findings and suggestions if you want to give in a very beautiful manner to the people. Now what happens after that? When people who are not able to meet you, you cannot meet all the people. Whoever needs that, you cannot meet. Now your research report is going to do that job. Now your research report is the presentation of whatever you have found in so many years. That is the concise report of your research work. Now you can understand through this that research report is the evidence of what, right from the beginning to the end of your research, right? This is important. So that's why we say that research report is a medium of communication between the researcher and other peoples and other stakeholders, or you can say and the people who needs your research for their development, you can say like that. So it's the medium of communication. Now what is communication? Whatever you have found has to be communicated in the exact way the people want it to, right? That means you have to present it in the exact meaning, so that people can understand the exact meaning what you have exactly found in your research. That is the exact meaning of communication, right? You say something and people understand something else is not a communication. So whatever you have found in your research, in your analysis, in your study, has to be presented in a very proper format that people are able to understand it exactly as you have presented it. So that's the medium. So that research report is the medium through which you are communicating with the people, right? So you can say like that. Then we have some important features, and these features has to be kept in mind before drafting a research report. Now what are these features? So let us see one by one. So point number one, it is a detailed presentation of the research process of and the findings, and it is usually including graphs and tables. So that means whatever you have done in your research process, finally you sum up the findings, and finally you present that findings, because in the entire section of the report, the findings are the most important part, because all the analysis that you have done, the interpretation that you have done is only for the findings. And after the findings, the most important part in your research is going to be the suggestions, because based on those finding is what we were, right, the objectives, right, to find out why. So the analysis, right, so we have found out, and you are summing up that findings, you are presenting it. So now see, the findings should be precise, it should be in a simple language so that every ordinary man can understand it. And you are presenting some tables. Now what is table? Consolidation of similar data. Now you consolidate similar kind of data in one table, so that you can build some kind of relationship between one variable with other, and it becomes easy and convenient for you to interpret, and easy for the people to understand between two tables or two set of data. And finally you also present some pictorial representations, and that may be including some kind of graphs, right? And these graphs can give you some kind of comparison between two data, and when you go for such kind of comparisons, it becomes very easy for the people to understand, because when something is not understood by looking at the numbers, these pictures can make that work simpler, right? So this is one important finding. The second important finding is that it should be given in a formal language. Now formal language, what is a formal language? Formal language means, see, when generally we used to present in India, we used to present all the research in English, and when we use that English, we say that language should be very formal. The formal means which is understood by all. Some kind of colloquial words or local words should not be used, and only the appropriate words should be used, so that it depicts the exact meaning what the researcher wants to depict. Now the third important point is, we say research report is generally written in third person. That means whenever you draft a report, you say that the researcher found that, the researcher says that, the researcher wanted that. So this is what we write. So we write in third person, because so that it becomes very easy for the ordinary person, when he reads, he can understand that very properly. Now another important point is, it is informative and based on the first hand verifiable information. Now what is verifiable information? You have collected some data from the sources, and that sources is verifiable. That means it's the data that you have collected is genuine. So whatever workings that you are doing, whatever analysis you have done, is based on some kind of genuine information or genuine data, which is always verifiable. So then only it gives a trust to the people on your research work. Another important point in drafting a research is, it is formally structured with some headings, subheadings, sections, and always we use some kind of bullet points. Because see, why we use bullet points? When you present some data or text in a paragraph format, there is always a possibility of skipping a few lines. Just the reader will read the first line, and straight away he will go to the last line. So when you present the same thing in a bullet points, so the possibility of skipping the points is reduced. So he can go through all the bullet points, because you are highlighting only the important points, and you are eliminating the unnecessary words between. So you are reducing the efforts of reading when you present it in a bullet form. And another important or last important point is it should always recommend for future actions. That future actions are the recommendations, or you can say the suggestions. That means when you are working out to find some solution for a problem, now this becomes the duty of the researcher to give some kind of recommendations, or you can say suggestions. Now always your research should carry some kind of suggestions, so that in the point of view of researcher, what he is, because he is the person who is associated with that research, and what he wants to tell, what he wants to tell as a suggestion for this kind of problems. And this research report should give a scope for future research also. That should also be included, that a research is never ending process. When you complete a research at a point, that it doesn't mean that it is the end. Another person can start with that point as a starting point and he can proceed. So your research work should always give a scope for future research also. Now when we say types of research report, the most important popular type is technical research report and popular research report, as you can find those in books by some authors also. But apart from that, we can also include this qualitative research report and quantitative research report, as we have seen that qualitative interpretation of data is possible, and on the same time qualitative interpretation of data is also available. So the interpretation of data is the main part of your research report. So when that becomes the main part of your research report, that becomes a type of your research also. So that's why I have included these two in the types of research also. So let us see what is qualitative research report. So as we say, so where you have all numbers, right, all kind of numbers. When there is no numbers and only words, right, which is very descriptive in nature. The other word for the qualitative is also described as popular research report also, but sometimes it becomes very purely as qualitative research. And then when everything is given in terms of words, explanatory, which is very explanatory, which is giving some kind of where there is more of explanation part, right, that is, you can say, as qualitative research report. And when you come for quantitative research report, where there is more of numbers, you have worked on numbers, you have used some kind of tables, you have used some kind of tools to analyze those numbers, and you have derived some kind of information out of that and you present it. So that can be said as quantitative research report. And that is what is been also said in technical research report. Technical research report means where your emphasis is more on analysis part, presentation part, right, and where you have using lot of statistical tools. The focus is mainly on the numbers, right, the methodology that you have followed, right, your focus, your emphasis is more on that part of your research. You want it to be very systematical, you want it to be very technical, so you have followed all the systematic procedures, right from the drafting, right from the selection of the title for data, and then making some objectives and preparing a questionnaire or interview schedule for as a tool for data collection. And even when you go for data collection, the sampling techniques you are using very systematically, how to choose your sample out of the population. So all these things becomes very technical. So all these things makes a very systematic approach, or gives a very systematic approach. And in your report also you present it very systematically. You have shown all the kinds of statistical tools that you have applied, and the result what has come out of that statistical tools, and how you have interpreted them, and what meaning does it give. So this is a technical research report. And when you say popular research report, it is more of attraction, where you have using more words, which then there is no emphasis on the technical part, and everything is going on descriptive. And sometimes you use a lot of pictures also to make it more attractive and gather the attention of the reader. So this is a popular research report. Now what is the importance of a research report? Now we speak so much of research report. Let us understand what is the importance of a research report. Now importance, I can say two basic importance of a research report. One is knowledge transfer. That is what I have said here. Knowledge transfer means, see, when you do some kind of research, that research is adding to the existing knowledge, right? You are already, some knowledge is there and you are adding to that knowledge. That means you are contributing your part. You are finding out something, you are doing some research and you are contributing the knowledge, right, which is already existing, but you are contributing, you are taking it to the next level. So that knowledge transfer is done through this research report, because you are adding some information, you are adding something to the existing, you are going to contribute to something. And how you are doing that? Through your research report. This is one point. And another important point is identification of gap. Now when you do this kind of research, you find some gap, right? A research report shows what has been done while hinting at other areas that need systematic investigation. That's what I say here. That means when the study is made, you find your own limitations, right? And at that time, that limitations we also present in our research report. That means we say that still we have taken the utmost care in doing this research, but still these are some kind of limitations that I have found in my research work. So now that helps the other researcher to identify the gaps that what you have left over, and they can fill that gap. That means that gives the scope for future research. Now the most important part in a research report. Now how do you write a research report? Now how do you write a research report? As I said, your research report has to be very technical in the sense it has to be very systematic. That means it should be in a very proper manner, in a very formal manner. So what you have to do is you have to split up into some small sections so that it becomes a very meaningful thing for the people to understand that in which section what you have given in each section, right? So generally we start with introduction. In that introduction, you introduce about the study, where you are going to make that study, the profile of the area there where you are going to make that study, and you are going to explain about the methodology, the research design of your study, what you are going to follow. You are going to explain depict that objectives of your study, limitations. Then you are going to tell the main thing, that is the statement of the problem in that introduction, so that people can understand while reading that introduction part, that what is this research about and how you have done it. This simple thing, right? What is this research about and how you have done it is going to be explained in this introduction. Now next comes the literature review. Now literature review is very important aspect, because you have to go through the literature. Literature review is nothing but the previous studies. You are going to study or analyze the previous research done on the same or related area, so that you can have an idea that till how or till where the previous researcher has made or contributed their knowledge and what you are going to do the next. So this is very important. Until and unless you go for that literature review, you will be repeating the same kind of research again and again, which may not be useful for that will be a simple waste of time, money and efforts in doing the same research again and again in some areas where you don't need exactly the research has to be done. So literature review is important in understanding the research gap, where the previous researchers have left over and what you can do next. Then it is also useful to understand the methodology, the systems, what they have followed, and what you can use them, how you can use them, and what you should do, what you should not do. All these things can be found out through your study of literature. Now next important things comes as analysis and interpretation. So this is the main part of your study, analysis and interpretation, because the data that you have collected so far, you are going to present it in a very formal format. So this formal presentation of that data is going to be very important to make people understand easily, and interpretation of that collected data is again important. That is going to be the main part of your research report. And when it comes to this part of analysis and interpretation, you can again further split into some sections, so that each section is giving some having some emphasis on one particular thing. So you can divide that section based on some kind of similarities, some kind of homogeneity in that data that you have collected and the way that you are going to analyze. Now next is findings. So after the interpretation is done, now the next important thing is to derive or extract the findings, and you present that findings in your research report, so that people can understand throughout the research what you have found out and what is the summary of your findings. And finally your conclusions, right, what you conclude, how you conclude, and the most important part is references and appendix. Now why this reference is important? Now see, when you do the study of literature, that is review of literature, you try to gather some kind of informations which is provided in those theses or books, whatever, or article that is being published, and you try to get that references, you try to take that and use it in your research. Now that is an original work done by somebody else and you are going to use it. That is not your work. So people should understand that this work or this part of the work, what you have given or what you have presented in your research report, is not the work of this researcher. This is a work of some other researcher. So that's why the reference has to be quoted there. So when you quote that reference, people can understand that this part of the research is taken from that study. So you become very genuine in your actions. You become very genuine in your presenting your research report, because you claim the credit only for the work that you have contributed, that knowledge that you have contributed. Right. So this is again an important aspect, and let us see what references are presented. Now coming to the last part of this session. Now let us discuss about in very short. Let me tell you about the APA style of giving some references. Now what is APA? That is American Psychological Association. They have given some standard formatting styles for the mentioning the references. So when you mention the references has to be very systematical. That means that should be some kind of standard which has to be followed in giving all that kind of references, because you are going to use lot of such references in your research work, and that references should be in a very proper manner, very systematic manner, and they should carry some kind of similarity, so that you can differentiate what is the references, if that reference is a book, or if that reference is a chapter of the book, or if that reference is an published article or some thesis. So this kind of differences it can state. So when and it will also state the author, the title, the year, the place, the publication, everything. So some kind of standards has to be followed in that. Now when you take an article from a journal, how that reference is normally done. So first we give the name of the author's initials at the back, so that when you sort that author's name in an alphabetical order, so that comes in a very proper manner. So you have to put the initials on the back, and then you state the year, and after that the title, and after providing the title you have to give the source, right, source of that journal, and then the page number and any other such reference. So this is the order when you quote a reference from a journal. And when it comes to a book chapter, then again the author, the chapter, the name of the book, edition, then volume if it is given, then page number from where the chapter has taken, then the place where the book is published, and the publisher. After that the publisher. And when it comes to a book, it becomes somewhat simple, because here you are going to give only the name of the author, name of the book, edition, and after giving that name of the author, you can give the you should give the year when it was published, then the name of the book, the edition, then the place of publication, and the publisher, right? And mostly the references are taken from thesis, right, already published thesis. So when it comes to thesis, it should be like you should start with the author of the thesis or the researcher of the thesis. Then you have to definitely provide the year. Then you have to provide the title of the thesis and the source where the thesis is kept, or where the thesis is, if it is online, then you have to give it online, and the place of that thesis. And definitely if it is taken online, you have to give the URL address of that online thesis also. And if it is not an online thesis, you can avoid that. You can go with the name, then year, then the title of the thesis, then publication if it is published, publication number if it carries any, then the source of the thesis where you have taken it from, and finally the place, right? So this is the order. So I think in this entire presentation I am able to give some kind of small eye opening, because it's a very vast area. I cannot keep on speaking on that because it will take lot of time, and it's a video presentation. So I think I should keep it very precise so that you can go through the entire video and you can understand. So I hope I have done some justice to the topic, and I was able to give some explanation, a good explanation about interpretation and report writing. So once again, let me thank my management, my principal, Dr. C. Ashokshar, HODs of UG department and PG department, and of course all the participants for your patience listening. Thank you.